there's nothing I can do to take it back. And if someone was hurt by it, saying I'm sorry isn't enough.
Michael Jackson's passing in 2009 was officially explained in clinical language: an accidental overdose, a medical misjudgment, a superstar whose body finally gave out under the weight of insomnia and pressure. But when we look at what came out later in court filings and estate records, we are no longer just talking about a tragic night in LA. We are staring at a financial catastrophe so large that it threatened to erase his legacy and swallow the empire he spent 4 decades building. At the time of his passing on June 25, 2009, documents now show that Michael was carrying more than $500 million in debt, including tens of millions tied directly to the This Is It tour that was supposed to save him. Suddenly, the simple story of an exhausted artist and a reckless doctor starts to sound incomplete.
It's a lot more complicated than just Dr. Murray was at his bedside when he died. Circumstances had been leading up to this for years.
We can see how that changes the way we frame his final months. In the summer of 2009, Michael was 50 years old, preparing for 50 comeback shows at London's O2 Arena, rehearsing until after midnight on June 24th, then returning to a rented Holmby Hills mansion where, according to investigators, propofol and multiple sedatives were being used just to get him a few hours of sleep. On paper, this was his big return, the moment to repair his public image after the 2005 trial and years of uncomfortable headlines. Behind the scenes, as later stated in LA Superior Court, interest on his debts was piling up at extremely high rates, some loans already in default. We are looking at a man cornered not just by the media, but by numbers on a page that no amount of choreography could outrun. What makes this even harder to ignore is what happened after June 25th. Within weeks of his passing at that LA hospital, sales of his albums exploded, old tracks shot back up the charts, and in October 2009, the This Is It documentary stitched from rehearsal footage hit theaters and went on to earn around $260 million worldwide. In the years that followed, posthumous albums, Cirque du Soleil shows, and licensing deals turned a supposedly bankrupt icon into one of the highest-earning celebrities on the planet. Then, in 2024, a LA appeals court approved a roughly $600 million deal to sell a portion of his music rights to Sony over the objections of his mother, Katherine Jackson, who argued that Move violated his wishes. When we put this timeline next to that $500 million debt figure, the question almost asks itself, if Michael Jackson was drowning financially while alive, why did his passing instantly become the most lucrative event of his career?
As you may already know, after my tour ended, I remain out of the country undergoing treatment for a dependency on pain medication. This medication was initially prescribed to see the excruciating pain that I was suffering after recent reconstructive surgery on my scalp.
Meanwhile, the official cause of passing was pushed to the front of every broadcast. The LA County coroner ruled it a homicide caused by acute propofol intoxication, combined with sedatives like lorazepam and midazolam, administered in a private bedroom rather than a monitored hospital setting. Dr. Conrad Murray, the cardiologist brought on weeks earlier at a reported $150,000 a month to supervise Michael during This Is It, was later convicted of involuntary manslaughter in a 2011 LA trial after jurors heard that he left the room, delayed calling emergency services, and kept no proper monitoring equipment on site. On paper, that verdict should have closed the case. But when we see how swiftly the business machine surged into motion after June 25th, the homicide ruling starts to look less like the end of the story and more like the beginning of a much bigger puzzle. Soon after, the money trail grew even harder to ignore. Estate filings described how, at the time of his passing, Michael's most significant assets were subject to more than $500 million of debt and creditors' claims, language that stunned even veteran entertainment lawyers who saw the numbers. Creditors were circling, lawsuits were stacking up. He reportedly owed about $40 million to the promoter behind This Is It alone. Yet posthumous income became so strong that by the mid-2010s, those same executors could boast of paying off or restructuring most of those obligations, turning what looked like a collapsing empire into a thriving brand. Industry insiders quietly began asking a question fans had already been whispering. How can the exact same catalog and image be on the edge of collapse on June 24, 2009, and then transform into a money-printing machine only after its owner is gone? That is where the first major contradiction lands with full force. We have Katherine Jackson in court fighting to block that $600 million Sony rights sale, arguing that the transaction cuts against what her son would have wanted and accusing estate managers of pushing deals that benefit corporations more than family. We have a documented post-2009 boom, albums reissued, unreleased tracks pulled from the vault, global merchandising campaigns rolled out in record time. Insiders familiar with those negotiations say the speed of these moves looked less like improvisation and more like a pipeline that was ready to go. If that is true, we have to ask, were the wheels of Michael Jackson's most profitable era set in motion only after his passing? Or were they quietly built while he was still rehearsing for This Is It in LA?
Graduated from pain meds to anesthesia. He used it to sleep, and he became shockingly reliant on it. A lot of people were saying privately, Michael's addictions and the cancellation of the Dangerous tour were directly connected.
Then the family rebellion broke into public view. In 2012, a letter signed by Janet Rebbe, Randy Tito, and Jermaine Jackson accused estate executors John Branca and John McClain of fraud, forgery, and exploitation, and questioned whether Michael ever signed the 2002 will that put them in charge. The siblings claimed he was not even in LA on the date listed on that document, and alleged that he had told relatives he did not trust these men. Representatives of the estate dismissed those accusations as recycled internet conspiracy theories, but the damage was done. When the brothers and sisters of the King of Pop formally suggest his will may be invalid, we are no longer in fan forum territory. We are staring at a direct challenge to the paperwork that controls every dollar made off his name. Once that letter surfaced, the implications became impossible to ignore. If the will at the center of a multi-hundred-million-dollar empire is questioned by immediate family as potentially forged or improperly executed, what else about the official narrative starts to look negotiable? We know that after his passing, control over Michael's catalog, image, and future earnings flowed largely through that contested document. If there were any truth to the claim that he despised key figures now managing his estate, we have to consider a darker scenario, that the people he allegedly did not want near his finances ended up directing every major move made with his music after June 25th. At the same time, concerns about his state of mind and fears over losing control of his catalog were already circulating. Financial advisors quoted in tax proceedings and estate negotiations described an artist under immense pressure, one who was repeatedly warned that failing to generate new revenue could put prized assets like the Sony ATV catalog at risk. Former associates have claimed he privately vented that he no longer owned himself, that every tour, every deal, was dictated by the need to keep lenders at bay. When we overlay that with reports of 16-hour rehearsals, chronic insomnia, and the decision to bring a personal doctor into his rented LA mansion in the final weeks, the picture that emerges is not just of an entertainer in comeback mode, but of a man running out of exits.
I do those solo albums and I'm doing all kinds of different music. It's wonderful. I feel like I'm accomplishing what I'm supposed to do.
And you don't feel guilty or worried about your brothers?
No.
But for some observers, that is where the most controversial idea begins to take shape. The notion of a premeditated exit, not necessarily in the sense of a staged disappearance, but as a last-ditch maneuver to protect what he valued most. If Michael truly believed that remaining in the spotlight meant losing his catalog, his estate, even his autonomy to creditors and corporate partners, then the sudden, seamless post-June 2009 transition into a tightly controlled, highly profitable estate looks less accidental. Insiders in the music business quietly note that, in financial terms, the day he left that LA hospital was the day his balance sheet started to heal. That cold reality forces us to confront an unsettling question we are still not done unpacking. Because when we step back and connect the staggering $500 million debt, the homicide ruling with its unanswered gaps, the explosive posthumous windfall, and a family openly accusing the estate's power brokers of fraud, the official story starts to sound less like a closed case and more like the surface layer of something far bigger. And as we follow that money trail forward, from court petitions to that $600 million rights sale, we begin to see a pattern of decisions that seem almost too coordinated for a narrative built on chaos and medical negligence alone, raising the possibility that what happened around Michael Jackson in 2009 was not just a personal tragedy, but the opening move in a calculated restructuring of an entire empire that he may have seen coming long before anyone else dared to say it out loud.
I never enabled his addiction, which I was not aware of. Your Honor, I am an innocent man. They accused me of having Michael on a 3-hour propofol infusion. That was false.
While the balance sheets flipped from crisis to boom, another story was unfolding far from the headlines. A battle over who really controlled Michael Jackson's body, his schedule, and ultimately his legacy in those final weeks. At the center of it all stood Dr. Conrad Murray, the personal physician hired at a reported $150,000 a month, his fee arranged through the promoter behind the London shows. We look at that number and the structure of the deal, and we are forced to ask who Murray was really working for. Was he primarily there to care for a fragile superstar, or was he there to protect a multi-million-dollar touring investment that could not afford a canceled run of O2 concerts? When the court later branded his actions as reckless, it left one question hanging in the air. Was he a lone professional who crossed a line, or a paid piece on a much larger corporate chessboard? We know that prosecutors painted Murray as the man who agreed to use powerful sleep aids night after night inside a rented mansion instead of a monitored clinic, and that a jury eventually decided his conduct crossed the line into criminal negligence. But when we follow the contracts instead of the courtroom soundbites, something else comes into focus. The physician's pay did not come directly from Michael's pocket. The money flowed from the tour machine that needed its star on stage, upright and performing, no matter how exhausted he was. That structure created a quiet conflict. The person in charge of saying enough also had every incentive to keep the show on track. So when we picture those late nights with rehearsal footage on one side and private medical experiments on the other, we have to wonder whether Murray was truly steering events, or whether he was just the most visible link in a chain built to protect profits first and a patient second. Inside the family, that never sounded like an accident. In 2017, Paris Jackson sat down with Rolling Stone and did something very few heirs to a global icon ever do. She pushed her grief aside long enough to call what happened to her father a setup. She did not hedge. She did not present it as a vague feeling. She framed it as a belief that someone wanted him gone. Coming from a teenager who had spent her entire life with cameras in her face, that statement landed like a lightning bolt because it echoed whispers that had been circulating inside the Jackson circle for years. If the person who lost the most insists it was not random, how much longer can the rest of us pretend the story is simple?
Puff Daddy flipped out regarding Michael Jackson at a party in Los Angeles. Apparently, a bunch of celebrities got together and they were having a tribute party for Michael Jackson. And one of Michael Jackson's songs was playing. What was the name of the song?
A Man in the Mirror.
Man in the Mirror was playing. There we go. And, you know, the celebrities like Queen Latifah, Wesley Snipes, Hill Harper, they were all dancing, having a good time.
Paris's words also lined up eerily with claims LaToya Jackson had been making on and off since the early 90s. She has said that Michael feared powerful interests around his music and warned that people might come for him because of the catalog he controlled. One quote in particular has followed her. The allegation that he told her, "They're going to eliminate me from my music publishing." Whether every relative agrees on the exact phrasing hardly matters. What matters is that multiple members of the same family have repeated the same basic fear for decades. To them, his passing was not just a medical emergency. It was the end point of a long campaign to pry his most valuable asset out of his hands. When we put Paris's setup comment next to LaToya's long-standing warnings, a pattern emerges that is hard to dismiss as random family drama. We have a daughter who believes someone orchestrated her father's final chapter, and a sister who says he confided in her about threats tied to the rights he owned. Add in brothers who questioned the validity of his will, and a mother who fought against a multi-hundred-million-dollar sale of his catalog, and the picture that forms is crystal clear. The people who shared his last name are, in different ways, united by the sense that the official story leaves out the most important motives. From their vantage point, this was never just about a doctor, a bedroom, and a tragic morning in LA. Outside the family, attention shifted to the circle that managed his day-to-day reality. One high-profile investigation by TMZ described a whole entourage involved in sourcing and delivering the substances Michael relied on to sleep, an informal pipeline of prescribers and assistants who made sure he never had to walk into a pharmacy or a clinic himself. Among the names repeatedly mentioned was Dr. Arnold Klein, the Beverly Hills dermatologist whose office Michael visited for years and who, at one point, was wanted for questioning by LA investigators. Reports from that period suggest Klein's clinic may have been one of several locations where prescriptions flowed easily and oversight was murky. If that is true, then the environment around Michael was less like a standard medical setup and more like a customized system designed to keep him functioning at all costs.
Guys, they found underground tunnels at Diddy's homes. This was first brought up by Shadow of Ezra, where he talked about the underground tunnels in Diddy's luxurious Los Angeles mansion. It was an underwater swimming tunnel leading to a mysterious grotto, reminiscent of an ancient and modern human use of caves.
That system raises disturbing questions about responsibility. If multiple professionals knew he was leaning on strong sleep aids and still continued to sign off on refills, how much of the blame can realistically be placed on a single cardiologist at the end of the chain? Lawyers who reviewed the case have pointed out that no global superstar operates in a vacuum. Assistants, managers, security staff, and consultants all see pieces of the puzzle. Yet, only one man ended up in a defendant's chair. Was Conrad Murray truly the architect of everything that happened, or was he simply the most convenient target in a landscape where many people preferred not to look too closely at their own role in keeping the machine running? The more we examine that landscape, the more it looks like a controlled environment engineered to protect a brand, not a person. Insiders have claimed that Michael's schedule, nutrition, and rest were all subordinate to the demands of the This Is It production calendar, with rehearsals booked, costume fittings slotted in, and camera crews rolling as insurers and promoters tracked every update. In that world, anyone who insisted on a hard medical stop would not just be caring for a patient, they would be threatening a cascade of penalties, refunds, and lost revenue. So instead of a clear break, what we see is a long string of compromises, each one nudging him a little closer to the edge while the people around him reassured themselves that this show, this tour, this deal would finally fix everything.
This tunnel connects to the Playboy Mansion. You guys remember that? Hugh Hefner, the guy who lived with all those women in his mansion? There's no available evidence right now. However, reports are noting that Combs mansions do have a pool with an underwater swimming tunnel. They say it's not connected to the Playboy Mansion, but there is a reason why the Playboy Mansion keeps coming up.
Once we step past the personal and look at the paperwork, hints of a deeper cover-up begin to surface. Over the years, observers have pointed to sealed portions of the coroner's files, missing surveillance footage from the mansion, and gaps in the record of who came and went in those last 24 hours. Some of that may be standard procedure in a high-profile case. But when key documents stay locked away, and when essential minutes of camera footage simply never appear, speculation fills the vacuum. Who had access to those tapes? Who decided which records would be released and which would remain under wraps? And, crucially, did any of those decision-makers have financial skin in the game when it came to protecting the value of Michael Jackson's brand? The questions only grow sharper when we return to the issue of control over his finances. In his final days, Michael's official titles and ownership stakes were spread across trusts, holding companies and joint ventures that only a handful of specialists truly understood. Former associates have claimed that a small circle of advisors effectively acted as gatekeepers, deciding which offers reached him, which debts were renegotiated, and which assets could be leveraged. If that circle also had ties to companies that later profited from his catalog, the line between advisor and beneficiary starts to blur. And when the same blueprint that governed his finances while he was alive continued guiding deals long after he was gone, we have to ask whether anything in that system ever really changed, or whether only the signature at the bottom of the page did. All of this feeds the most controversial theory of all, that what the world experienced as a chaotic medical emergency could, in reality, have been the final move in a calculated financial reset. For some, that means believing in a staged disappearance, an exit so elaborate that only a handful of insiders could have pulled it off. For others, it means seeing his passing as a foreseeable outcome of decisions that made his well-being secondary to balance sheets and catalog control. In both versions, the same question lies underneath. Did the people who stood to gain the most from his absence do enough to keep him safe while he was still here? And that brings us to the chilling possibility that refuses to go away. If the official timeline is incomplete, if the Entourage system blurred accountability, if the paper trail points to a small group quietly steering his empire, then we are left staring at a puzzle with pieces that never quite click into place. The sealed files, the missing footage, the unanswered family accusations, the explosive growth in post-2009 earnings, the giant catalog deals signed long after the memorials ended. Taken together, they form a story that feels less like random misfortune and more like a carefully managed transformation. So we have to ask, if Michael Jackson's exit was not just a tragic night in LA, but part of a larger plan, who designed it? Who helped him vanish from the stage? And why are they still so silent after all these years? Let us know what you think in the comments. Tell us which theory makes the most sense to you, and whether you believe the King of Pop truly left us, or simply stepped behind a curtain we were never meant to see behind. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and take care of your own legends before someone else decides their final chapter for you.